Today's show is very special to me. I was recently interviewed on Boundless Body Radio by my friend Casey Ruff. Casey is not only one of the best hosts on the internet, he has also been a personal trainer since 2007. Casey and his darling wife Bethany offer strength training, Pilates, Rossiter-based bodywork, and nutrition coaching through their company Boundless Body LLC in South Jordan, Utah. I have included a link to their website in the show notes. Along with his full-time commitment to help others through Boundless Body LLC, Casey also hosts his podcast, Boundless Body Radio, and his YouTube channel, Boundless Body LLC. In his more than 860 shows, Casey interviews incredible guests ranging from authors, health and nutrition experts, and people like me who have transformed their health through nutrition, exercise, and proper sleep hygiene. I strongly encourage you to follow Casey's shows. Here's my interview with Casey Ruff on Boundless Body Radio.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Greg Rocheford became a personal friend as we met through our podcast, Boundless Body Radio. Greg has worked as a geologist and an IT professional and has climbed the Devil's Tower, jumped out of a plane twice, and slept in a snow cave. That's pretty gnarly. In 2021, Greg heard of an approach called intermittent fasting and found that it was effective for weight loss. As a chair-bound IT professional, Greg developed a soft muffin top around his waistline. In August of 2021, Greg fasted for an incredible 206 hours in 3 weeks and started a physical therapy program for past shoulder injuries. He began to notice big changes, and even his wife was impressed with the changes she had noticed in such a short time. Greg then began eating a low-carbohydrate, meat-based diet, which produced even better results. After retiring at 62 in 2022, Greg purchased a college biology textbook at his local Goodwill. What followed is a continuing and amazing journey of body and mind. Greg joined a local YMCA when he turned 65 in 2024 and has added enough muscle mass that he regularly gets compliments from many who guess that he is much younger than 65. Recently, he began a part-time job at his local YMCA as a health and wellness coach. That is so cool. Greg Rocheford, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you very much, Casey. It is an honor to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor to host you. Such a funny story. You started to message me last year, 2024, during the summer. You had some incredibly kind things to say, which really meant a lot to me. I love when, our listeners reach out and we can connect and, send some message back and forth. And like I said, you were sending me such kind messages. And we were talking back and forth. And at the time, I was teaching a seminar series in my neighborhood all about nutrition. And it was going on the same day and the same time. It was every Tuesday at noon here locally. And I was scheduled from basically Memorial Day all the way out to Labor Day. There's just 1 week that I was not going to be able to be there because we had a family vacation. I was going to be in Colorado with my wife's family. So one day I get an email and you're like, hey, I've got great news. I'm going to come to your nutrition seminar. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing. You're in Washington. Like, are you sure you're coming out? And you messaged me back and said, yep, I'm going to be there the first week of July. And the sinking feeling I had in my stomach of like, oh my goodness, this guy booked a flight to come out from Washington. He booked a hotel. And I didn't even know what to reply. Like, I seriously sat on that email for like 3 hours, like stressing because I'm like, I have to message this guy and tell him, dude, the 1 week you've already booked this trip. I felt so bad. I felt so bad that you would go to such lengths to come out to my Mickey Mouse nutrition seminar in my neighborhood on the 1 week that I wasn't even going to be there. I felt terribly, Greg. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no big deal. No big deal. Yeah, I should have let you know that I was thinking about doing that because what are the chances of that happening,
Oh my gosh. I know. So yeah, we just kept it the same day, same week. And it's such a kind gesture to come out. And everybody talked about you when you left. We didn't draw tons and tons of people. We weren't having like big crowds as I would have hoped to, make a bigger impact, but they still appreciated you. You were contributing. And like I said, after you left, the people that you made friends with and met, they talked about you quite a bit for several weeks afterwards. So
very nice.
Yeah, we all wanted to tell you hello and tell you thank you for changing your arrangements, coming out the next week unbooking and rebooking and all that nonsense. Like I said, I felt so bad.
Oh, well, thank you. But yeah, it wasn't a big deal, really.
Well, that's awesome. I recently had to rebook flights for the Symposium for Metabolic Health that I'm going to in San Diego. And I found that I had to cancel a flight and rebooking the flight. It was actually cheaper the second time around.
Oh,
So it actually benefited me to cancel and rebook. So I hope something like that
sure.
happened and worked out for you, or maybe like the hotel was,
Yeah.
less expensive or cheaper plane flight or something.
Yeah, I think everything was really flexible, and I think I was probably using flight miles, so all I had to do was just transfer them over. And I don't think there was there it. I think it was really if there was a cost, it was probably like $20, so not a big deal. Yeah,
You could have sent us an invoice, and Boundless Body would have been glad to pay the difference.
there you
Like
go.
I said, it was really, really meaningful that you wanted to come out there. And
Yeah,
yeah, luckily we were able to block out some time. We went on a walk around the neighborhood. I got to know you a
yeah.
little bit more. It was a really great time. One of my best memories of last year.
That made so much of an impression to me. Just taking that time to walk around that lake with you, and then getting that few days in the gym too, refinery
That's right. I
gym.
forgot
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, that was really great. Met some great people there. One guy was probably bigger than the house we live in, and just a sweet man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome. We did do a quick session there, didn't we?
we did. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and my shoulder actually, it's kind of interesting. It's still doing that weird thump sort of thing,
That's
and
right.
I'm getting kind of a little bulge on my clavicle where it attaches to my sternum. But when you get to my age, it's sort of like, well, that's age for you because these injuries just start building up. And it's sort of like Neanderthals that were found, in the record. They find all these bones, but they're all healed. And so they found out that these societies actually helped their members through a broken
Heard that.
bone. And a lot of these people, when they were looked at, their bones sort of looked like rodeo riders. They were saying that because there were so many broken bones, but they're all healed. And so that's sort of what happens if you're active. Towards 65, there's a lot of damage.
Sure, sure, and I definitely understand that, and we definitely do get beat up. But I look at you. If you're listening and not watching, what we mentioned in the introduction that you are 65 is stunning. It's absolutely
Oh,
shocking that you're 65. You look like
oh,
you're
thank you.
15, 20 years younger than that. And I just look at the pictures you post on social media and what you're doing. Like, yeah, we get banged up and stuff happens, but you're doing a lot of really positive things. Um,
Right.
at a time of life where a lot of my personal training manuals say you're losing muscle in your mid 30s, there's really not much you can do, you're just kind of fighting this losing battle. And i
Right.
i have absolutely seen that go the other way with many people. I used to train a guy that was in his late 70s and he absolutely added muscle mass. And to see you be able to do the same, like, yeah, there's going to be some injuries, but you can do a lot of good and you can start any time.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. The whole idea of losing muscle as you get older, I think that's definitely true, but I think it's based on our current society. And I think as we get older, we just get more sedentary. And as we get more sedentary, we create more myostatin. And myostatin is this amazing thing that sort of puts a ceiling on how much muscle we can build. And if you look up myostatin knockout mice, or I think it's blue Belgian cattle that are also myostatin knockout, so they're not creating any myostatin. So their muscles are free to grow as big as they want. So they have these little tiny gray mice. They're all cute and everything. And then a myostatin knockout mouse next to it looks like a rat, and it's huge and muscular, and a muscular mouse. I mean, come on, what's that? What's that about? But these cattle are almost grotesque. They have so much muscle, and so sedentary lifestyle and eating nutrition that doesn't give you nutrition, not enough protein especially, really brings up myostatin, and you lose a lot more muscle. As we don't eat enough protein, our bodies, it's sort of like a house. If you were to build a new room on the back of a house and you decided not to go to get lumber from somewhere else, you're just going to use your current house as the supply. The whole house gets weaker, but you might build that other room, or you might even take some of that lumber and fix the roof or something, but still the rest of the house is suffering. And that's sort of what happens if we don't take in enough protein. Our muscles go into sarcopenia, and sarcopenia just takes everything away. And you see that in older people with no butt, skinny legs, and a big belly. And a lot of them are type 2 diabetic because we're told that we're supposed to eat according to, the food pyramid or my plate, which is high in carbohydrates and bread and pasta and vegetables and stuff, and very little protein. And we're being pushed into this, and we're being handed a pretty dangerous lie, I think.
Wow. Well, we're 10 minutes into this conversation. It's already absolutely fascinating, and I've learned something already. So thank you very much for bringing all of that. And I do just have to ask you, tell us a story about sleeping in a snow cave.
Oh, well, I have a great friend who I've known for, gosh, about 35 years now. And he's pulled me into all sorts of stuff that I would have never done. And one of those was climbing Devil's Tower back in 1993. That was an experience that was just amazing. But Snow Cave, we lived in Minnesota at the time, and there's an area called Boundary Waters Canoe Area, the BWCA. And so we drove up in the winter, and the weather was going to be in the about 20 below. So we had all of our gear, and we had sleds that we hauled into the wilderness there. And then on a lake, we shoveled out the snow, build little stands that we were going to sleep on. The idea is that if the air comes in through the door, the really cold air stays down near the ice, and the warmer air stays about a foot higher. And then we just made a big pile of snow and dug all that out and carved out the little stands. And um, so we stayed in that. And what was kind of interesting is John was outside building a fire, and so he was in there, and another guy and I were in the cave drinking tea, and it was kind of steamy in there. And John pulled the duffel bags away from the door to come in, and instantly this 20 below or lower air came in, and everything, all this moisture froze instantly and just precipitated out. And we were in our t-shirts, up a ways, just trying to drink our tea, and we froze. I mean, our t-shirts instantly froze. And so we jumped into our sleeping bags, and we were really afraid that, I mean, we were so hypothermic. And John, bless him, he started making more tea for us. So we're like drinking more tea, and we're shaking so bad that tea is spilling all over and stuff. But
Goodness.
clearly I survived. But it was a real yeah, it's experience, I guess. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, clearly you made it. I've seen the videos of like somebody will walk outside when it gets that cold, maybe 20, 30, 40 degrees below, with a hot cup of coffee, and they'll throw it up in the air and just instantly turns into like coffee snow. That's
Sure,
crazy.
right. Yeah,
Wow.
it's really weird. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that story. Did
Sure.
you ever watch? It's kind of dated by now, but did you ever watch the series From the Earth to the Moon that HBO did all about the Apollo program?
I did not know.
I've always been a nerd about space stuff. There was a time when I was probably 11, 12 years old that Apollo 13 came out, and I had a guidebook that told me about every single mission that they did from Mercury to Gemini and Apollo, and I could tell you what their objectives were, who the crew was, all the other missions they
Sure.
were doing. And they did a series. Tom Hanks produced a series called From the Earth to the Moon, and one of the episodes that stands out the most was training the astronauts. I want to say it was maybe like Apollo 15, but it was training the astronauts to become geologists. As they were, going to the moon, at first it was like, okay, just get moon rocks. And as they wanted to diversify, they were thinking like, let's get interesting moon rocks. And so the episode was all about a geologist working with these astronauts here on Earth to train them so they could recognize like different things, so they could try to learn really interesting things. And I don't know very many geologists, but it was absolutely fascinating episode that I loved. And the geologist in there was like so passionate. Tell us about how you got into geology.
Boy. So after high school, I ended up driving a forklift. So I was driving a forklift, and one night I was pulled into the office by the assistant plant manager who was taking over for my boss, who was on vacation. And this was late at night. I was, gosh, 20 years old or whatever. So he tells me, get in here. And he was a former Marine sergeant, drill sergeant. So this guy's type A, just ripped, smoked Camel Straights by the pack. And so he pulls me into the office, and he tells me to sit down, and then he throws this little packet across the table at me. And he says, read this. And he said, you don't belong here. And I thought, I can't lose this job, sir. Please, no, just read it. So I pick it up, and it was a,
scholarship package from Mobil Oil Corporation, and he said, "You need to get out of here. You have too much potential." So, so I quit that job because part of the scholarship was that I would have to work full time and continue my job. And I thought, boy, that would be really hard to do. So I ended up going to community college. And in community college, I met this amazing geology professor he just had so much passion and was so good at it that I just went, wow, this is really great stuff. And hadn't really done much math. So I ended up taking a lot of math. I started basically at algebra and went all the way through 2 years of calculus and started thinking, boy, I really like this too, because it made so much sense. You always apply the same thing each time you have the same problem or a problem. And yeah, so ended up going to the University of Minnesota after that and got my degree in geology. And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the moon rocks. My petrology professor, it's basically just looking at rocks to identify them, actually had a piece of moon rock that he was given from NASA to analyze. And basically it was just gabbro or basalt. It's just almost the whole thing is the same rock, and it's just either powderized or it's in a piece. And so we actually had a piece of moon rock at the University of Minnesota, the Pillsbury Hall building there. So that was kind of
Wow.
interesting.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Lucky we live in such a cool place here in Utah where there's so many different climate zones. And even just last month, going down to Zion and you just see layer after layer after layer of, and just trying to wonder like what over the course of millions and millions and millions of years had transpired is just fascinating to wonder
Oh,
about.
no kidding. And all the muscle building or muscle building, the mountain building that brings all that up and then cuts it away. And then you can actually see that. It is really crazy.
So cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So tell us about your journey to health. Got a little bit of a glimpse into your professional journey and how you got into geology, but what was going on with your health at the time? As you were, graduating school and starting your career, were you working out much? Were you eating pretty normally? Like what was going on with you?
So when I was about 30, I started looking into supplementation because I was afraid, at 30, I'm so old, I'm going to be dead soon. So I started doing a bunch of supplementation and reading on that. And it was a book called, anyway, it doesn't matter. But my friend John and I actually started looking at that and doing a lot of things. And then that, as years went by, it kind of fell off. And by the time I was 40, I started getting back into working out. And so another friend of mine and I were in my basement. I had a whole bunch of free weights, and at the time I probably weighed like about what I do now, but I don't think I was anywhere near as muscular. Um, so about 150, and I was able to bench press 325
Wow.
on a one-time rep. And so then I snapped my long head bicep tendon, and that sort of brought an end to that. So for 25 years, I really didn't work out at all. And I sat in a desk as an IT professional, both in Minnesota and then when I moved out to the Seattle area. And so my body just really got soft. I got the muffin top and everything. And I just felt like, yeah, I'm getting old. Just look at me. And so I actually had the foresight to take some pictures of myself starting sort of when I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And that's kind of when I looked into the fasting, intermittent fasting seemed to give some results pretty quickly. I was maybe able to lose like a couple of pounds. I thought, okay, that's significant for just skipping breakfast. So then I started really getting into fasting. I got Jason Fung's book, and that's when I did the 206 hours in just a couple of weeks. It was like a 40-hour fast, a 50-hour fast, a 36, and a 72, all just back to back almost. And the weight just fell off. And I'm sure that I probably lost a little muscle mass at that time. Um, because when you don't eat for that long, I mean, clearly something's going to be lost. But after that, that's when I started some physical therapy on my shoulders. And so I was starting out with just the elastic kind of ribbons. And then I started noticing, even just by using those, that even my posture was starting to improve. And so then I went to the elastic bands, the heavier, wide ones, and started working with those. And got to a point where, gosh, that's kind of getting easy too. I think I need to push this. So I got a Bowflex machine and bought as many bows as I could for that, and then maxed that out. And actually, I was seeing some good improvement out of that. Then when I retired, as I mentioned, I started the YMCA here, and working with free weights and really pushing to failure has really created some amazing changes in especially my shoulders and things. So
Yeah, clearly.
yeah, and then
Like I
the
said,
whole diet.
go ahead.
Yeah, then the whole diet thing too. I started learning about keto, and I don't think I have enough discipline to do full keto, because an amazing diet that has so many benefits, both mentally and physically, because we start burning fat, and what we're trying to get rid of is fat. So if our bodies get used to that, become fat adapted, we can just burn like crazy. And creating ketones for energy is really a wonderful thing too, because they're used by our brains and everything else. They have about the same caloric count as glucose. But the thing is, if we don't use ketones, they just get breathed out or we pee them out. They don't get stored again. So you take fat, you break it up with beta oxidation, two at a time. Two carbons come off of the fat each time, and they get turned into energy. And if they don't get used, and if they're ketones, they just go away. And it's just so wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so you got such a great way of explaining things. I really like the way you explain that. And
Oh,
and
thank
for the
you.
listener, if you've ever wanted to know and validate whether you were doing a ketogenic diet and it was actually getting you into ketosis, it's cool because it's like the one diet that there is a measure to tell you whether you're in ketosis or not. If you
Yes.
can measure ketones, you're in ketosis. Like no other diet, you can't like check your Mediterraneans to see if you're doing a Mediterranean diet correctly or
Right.
anything else,
Yeah.
a South Beach, whatever. And a lot of people would think like, okay, I want to test this out, so I'm going to use urine strips. For the listener, if you've ever tried to do that, it will definitely work in the beginning. But what Greg just explained perfectly is initially your body has no idea what these things are. It's using fat, it's breaking them down into these ketones. But like you said so perfectly, it's getting wasted through the breath. You're urinating them out. And so it can be really frustrating because these strips, the urine strips, will work amazing in the beginning. And then 3, 4, 5 weeks later, as your body's adapting, not only is it not
Right.
making as many, it lowers the amount that it makes, but it also uses everything that it makes. And those two things level out and you just stop wasting nearly as much as you were before. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I want to go back to the fasting. As you explained that, you found Jason Fung's book, which is amazing. I do want to comment as well. I was just talking with Dr. Eveline Boudoir, who was just on our show, and I told her that anybody that I ever saw doing fasting, that I would test their body fat percentage and their muscle mass percentage. I did not observe one time that anybody doing fasting ever lost lean mass and muscle
You know,
mass.
I've heard that. That's really interesting. And yeah, definitely. Take, and contrast that with GLP-1 agonists. I was listening to Dr. Ben Bickman, the wonderful Dr. Ben Bickman, and he was mentioning, I think it's like 40% of the weight that's lost is lean muscle. And
Yeah.
that's just crazy. It's either lean muscle or lean body mass, which could be muscle and bone, which is scary too. But that's a huge amount of things you need that are going away if you don't exercise while you're on a GLP-1 agonist.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, focusing on protein as well is so
Exactly.
important. When
Right.
when you when you finally found the information about intermittent fasting, would you say you knew a lot about eating as far as like the standard kind of recommendations, or just not really necessarily on your radar?
Yeah, my eating was pretty much I was still eating a lot of rice, a lot of pasta, bread. I was thinking if I make my own bread, it's got to be good for me. If I make my own pasta, it's got to be good for me. And but it's still just a bunch of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are just these long chains of glucose. And when you put them in your mouth, they just chop up into glucose. So it's just like taking a spoonful of sugar instead of a piece of bread. You might as well. A piece of bread is 6 teaspoons of sugar. Take 6 teaspoons of sugar and toss it in your mouth. It's the same thing. And your body just goes crazy. Insulin goes way up. And you start storing all that. If at the best, it stores as glycogen in our liver and muscles, and we get to use that for energy. But when you start taking it in, it stores as fat. And what's really interesting is how those carbohydrates, they can be converted by our livers. Our livers are amazing. they can be converted by our livers into long chain fatty acids and saturated fatty acids. So when we eat a lot of carbohydrates, the reason our triglycerides go up is because all of that fat that's being created by our liver is going out to be stored. So our triglycerides in our bloodstream go up as we, eat more and more carbohydrates, and we wonder, why is fat going up when we're eating carbs? Well, it's because our body creates palmitic acid and stearic acid and oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fat. So it and stores all that. And so we're told we're not supposed to eat saturated fat, but it's the very kind of fat that our body stores for our survival. And to say it's bad to eat that, I don't understand. It's what our body makes to keep us alive.
Yeah. You could forgive somebody for mixing that up because it is a little counterintuitive, excuse me, that the carbohydrates turn into fat into the body, and fat doesn't really get stored in that same way inside the body. It gets used as energy and used for all kinds of stuff. So I understand why people had that simplistic idea of like, okay, let's not eat fat because it's called fat and it's called fat when it's on our bodies. But the way you explained it is, yeah, it's perfectly right. It's the carbohydrates that we're eating ad libitum
Right.
that really cause the problems. And I
Right.
always just marvel when somebody finds information like this. Like, how did you find intermittent fasting versus, say, the cabbage soup diet or Weight Watchers or whatever? Like, what was it about fasting that kind of caught your attention that, wasn't like calorie counting or all the other things that most people get themselves into?
I think I sort of looked at myself sort of as an N of one, as they say. When I started doing that intermittent fasting, I noticed that I did lose a couple of pounds. So I thought, if intermittent fasting does that, what would I get from more fasting? And then N of one again. My goodness, the weight just fell off. And like I said, Elaine, just from day to day, we'd get ready for bed and I'd be brushing my teeth and she'd go, "My God, you're losing weight." And that was just days. And it's really amazing. So I think it was my whole N of one. I had started on that path, although I've always loved cooking. So I've always been making my own food, and always from at least whole ingredients. Even if it was, some rice or whatever, I was trying to eat well, but that wasn't doing it. That was not doing it. And so fasting really did change my body really quickly. And then adding exercise. And I'm not sure who necessarily put this thought in my mind, but there's this sort of three-tiered stool that we need to live by. And that's exercise, good nutrition, and sleep hygiene. And if any one of those fall apart, the other two fall apart. And so they're all so important for us.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Yeah, again, I find it interesting that you found that of all things. And when you first started fasting, were you still eating a fairly mixed diet, like you said, like whole foods made at home, but you still had not brought in the kind of lower carbohydrate, ketogenic, animal-based approach at that point?
Right. And what was kind of interesting is reading Jason Fung's book, and also just seeing, I don't know if I saw your first episode yet by that time, but I may have. The first episode that my wife and I listened to was with Lear Keith, and that's a whole different wonderful story. But so I did start paying a little attention to what he was saying about insulin and how that causes fat gain, and why fasting works. And that, I'm kind of an engineer at heart. I need to know why, and I need to know how it works. How does this work? And a lot of the podcasts and YouTube videos that I saw, as well as reading the books that I was picking up, really explained how this works and why it works. And, with the biology that I was starting to learn, I kind of understood, oh, yeah, exactly. That's why this is working. And so I think it was all that, N of one. I saw it on myself. I saw great results. And I thought, well, I'm just going to continue and add these things that people are talking about.
Well, I recently went back and listened to the obesity code again, and it's hard to say, but like I'm a little bit more surprised that he's kind of diet agnostic. Like, he does talk about whole foods, he does talk about
Mhm.
carbohydrates and insulin, but it's not necessarily like a low carb keto kind of book. Like he explains it, but
You're right.
it's more along the lines of the fasting and that kind of thing. And he definitely explains, sugar, carbohydrates, all that stuff. And I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion that you need to lower your carbohydrates much more. But he definitely was pretty diet agnostic as far as like you don't necessarily need to do a ketogenic diet, although you're probably going to land there, like we said, if you put the pieces together.
Yeah, yeah. And then I also picked up Dr. Ben Bickman's book, Why We Get Sick.
Yeah.
And that's basically sort of a written version of his wonderful podcast. Um, there's so much in there, and so much is predicated on how much insulin is in your bloodstream, because insulin is all about storage. And what we were talking about earlier about, if you eat fat, you're going to get fat. Well, if you don't ingest insulin with that fat, in other words, rather, if you don't eat carbohydrates with that fat, there's no insulin spike. And your cells don't know what to do with all that energy. So they just create ketones and they burn the fat and get rid of it. But if you eat carbohydrates with the fat, then insulin is telling the cells, store this. And that's where you get the massive weight gain when you're eating fat and carbohydrates. And that's the stuff that's really tasty. Fat, carbohydrates, salt, sugar, all that stuff that's in the processed food these days, because it just lights your brain up and goes more. And you just eat it and you get big.
Such an important point. And I think a lot of people take, from the keto scene that like fat's not bad for you when you consume it. And it's true, but you have to keep in mind what you just said. It's true. Like if you have a good natural fat, animal fats in particular, some fats that come from fruits, if you're eating that in isolation, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's when it gets combined into all those delicious things. Like people don't, like you and I would just eat burger patties and be totally content. And that is just
Right.
protein and fat. There's nothing else really in it. Where most people eat the burger, they're eating the bun, they're eating all the things that come with it, the fries, the soda. When all of those
Sauce.
things run together, now exactly what you said, you're storing everything. And now the fat isn't so great for you the way it was in isolation. That works completely different. So I'm really glad you explained that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like what we were saying about, the beef, a hamburger, if you take 1,000, the whole calories in, calories out thing is so nuanced and not really the whole story. I mean, if you take 1,000 calories of donuts and 1,000 calories of hamburger and you put them both into a laboratory bomb calorimeter, you'll get 1,000 calories from both of them. They're exactly the same. But you put them in a human body, the results are completely different. The donuts with the fat and the sugar and all that garbage puts all of that into storage and makes you fat. 1,000 calories of beef will give you protein that you need to build, synthesize more protein with, and it gives you fat that we need for all of our cells. Everything requires fat, and the cholesterol we need, because cholesterol is sex hormones like progesterone and testosterone and coenzyme Q10. I mean, all these things for energy and bile for our gut, uh, gallbladder. So the gallbladder is all about spewing out all this wonderful stuff to help break up fat so that we can digest it better. And without that, if like especially with statins, there's this pathway called the mevalonate pathway that has kind of a beginning and an end, and it goes all the way through creating all of those things that I was just talking about, sex hormones and actual cholesterol and bile and all these things that we really need. And if we cut it off at the top, none of that gets built. And we start feeling low in energy. We can't digest our food as well. All these secondary effects from just taking one drug that cuts it off at the top. And yeah, it's the answer is really just good nutrition instead of going to all this other stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks again for explaining that. That's awesome. Whenever somebody tries intermittent fasting, they change their diet, they start to focus on fats and proteins in isolation and take their carbohydrates down. It's not only the weight loss, which we talked about so far, but there's all kinds of other things that people notice. What other non-scale things did you notice as you were changing your diet and incorporating more and more fasting?
Boy, it's kind of interesting, Casey, because I did a lot of fasting that first year, And I haven't done a lot since then. Every once in a while, I might do a couple 24-hour fasts or something. But what was interesting to learn that while I was doing some of the longer ones, especially like the 72-hour fast, on about the afternoon of the second day, I wasn't hungry at all. I just
Consistent,
didn't
so
want
consistent.
to. It was so interesting. I could have gone forever. And if I maintained, a good electrolyte balance, taking water and some salt and stuff, I felt energized and just fine. And I think it was Dr. Ian Lake is his name. He is a type 1 diabetic, and he, with a number of other friends of his, um, did a challenge where I think they ran 100 miles in 5 days without food, no food. And he said the first 2 days were kind of difficult, but by the third, fourth, and fifth day, they were making faster times than they did the first 2 days.
Yep.
And and that was no food whatsoever. And he said even as a type 1 diabetic, his glucose levels had really plateaued and just were really easy to contain. And so that was really interesting too. So I think that's kind of what I noticed from that. And like I haven't been doing much fasting lately because I want to make sure that I'm taking in as much protein as I can because I'm trying to build some muscle.
Yeah.
We know that muscle strength and the amount of muscle you have are big indicators on longevity. And whether or not I live longer is beside the point. I want to live well until I die. I don't want to be feeling like I can't do stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try working really hard to maintain my physique.
Lifespan versus health span, correct? Like
Right.
I want to drop off a cliff at some point in my 90s and die when I'm sleeping, but do so with so much health. Yeah, I absolutely love that. Okay, so what was the longest fast that you did?
72 hours, I think, was the
72.
longest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I have to say, dude, anybody I've ever talked to, any of my clients that ever tried it, they say exactly the same thing with such a low amount of variance. It's everybody's about the same. I'm a little hungry the first day. I'm pretty hungry the second day, but sometime around
Oh,
36, maybe 48 hours, the hunger just drops off. And if you
yeah.
think about how the bodies are working and how we're burning more fat, that makes a lot of sense. This is why I would use my metabolic carts and measure somebody's metabolism when they started doing fasting. Their metabolic rates would accelerate. They'd be burning way more calories than they should have been, which is exactly the opposite of what happens when we deplete our calories. That's why fasting
Right.
and calorie depletion work in exactly the opposite ways. You burn more energy. You have more energy to go and hunt and to find food. All that stuff
Right.
accelerates.
And your
I've
brain just
used
goes crazy. Yeah.
Oh, it goes crazy. Yeah, exactly. Which makes perfect sense. I had a guy who used fasting to lose an amazing amount of weight. He read the same book. He would do weekday fasts from time to time. And so he'd have a meal on Sunday evening. Then he'd go the entire week, weekdays, 5 days without any food. And he'd eat again on Friday night. And I trained him Tuesday and Friday. And Tuesday, he would be hungry. By Friday, he was PRing deadlifts. So he couldn't like find enough weight in the gym hardly to like put on his
Oh my
barbell. And he'd just
gosh.
go higher and higher and higher 5 days into a fast. And again, if you don't know the mechanisms, that might sound like, again, counterintuitive or a little bit weird. But once you understand the science behind it, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It's like your body stops paying attention to ghrelin. Ghrelin's going,
Right.
oh, you should eat. Ah, go away. After a while, it just says, go away. And yeah, that's incredible that guy was doing that.
Yeah,
Good for him.
you need energy. Like you need
Yeah.
energy to come from somewhere. And we're all eating and snacking and eating and snacking so much. We're
Right.
sending that insulin signal all the time. We're just in this like store mode. If you have body fat, if you're listening, if you're watching and you've got body fat that jiggles around and you don't like it very much and you want it gone, that is energy. It's just as good as the energy that comes from food you're eating today. It's food you ate yesterday and the day
Right.
before and the day before in a high insulin state where you told your body to store it. If you want it gone, stop eating and the body will accelerate its metabolism and get it gone and you won't be hungry. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Dr. Ian Lake was talking about. Even he's pretty lean. And right now, I think, like I said, I probably weigh 150, let's call it. And I'm about 12% body fat. So let's just call that 10%. I have 10 pounds or more of body fat on me. And 10 pounds is like 35,000 calories, something like that. And so it would take me a long time to burn through that much energy. So, we have a lot of energy built on us. And even being relatively lean, I have enough to go for days if I had to. And that's where the fasting comes in. If you go that far, and like you were saying, muscle loss is really not a big deal because there are things going on in your body that are like autophagy and stuff that's taking up the broken things and using those to rebuild. And so it's a building process, which is really weird. Like you said, it's so interesting that you're not eating, but yet you're building and becoming better.
Yeah. It's the reason why when you look up intermittent fasting before and after pictures, it's really one of the only ways I've ever seen that like somebody who loses a tremendous amount of weight, their after picture, they don't look like they'd ever been overweight. That doesn't happen with everybody, but it happens most frequently when somebody's doing fasting because yes, the body can use those proteins in your skin, for example, and repurpose them and use them somewhere else. That's what autophagy does. It's that recycling process. And so
Right.
rather than lose a bunch of weight by restricting your calories, now you've got excess skin you want to get rid of. Like the best chance that most people have of getting rid of that is doing some form of intermittent fasting where the body will repurpose all of that. I see it all the time. So
Oh, right.
um,
Yeah.
it's so cool. And of course, like we're not recommending that everybody go out and do intermittent fasting. You definitely need to work with an expert. Like you said,
Totally.
electrolytes become really, really important. But if you know a few tips and tricks and you're fairly confident you can go 2 or 3 days without eating, that's perfectly safe. And most people could pull that off and experience what it's like to get over the hump of that second day and not feel any hunger. It's pretty cool stuff. So um,
Right.
thank you for sharing all of that. We've been talking quite a bit about the importance of protein and muscle mass, and tell us about your journey with exercise, what you've learned. You talked about the different methods you were using, like using some free weights, using bands, using Bowflex, joining a gym. What have been some of the biggest driving principles for you as you've learned more and more about how to exercise properly?
Boy, form is really a big thing. I think I heard something that says momentum is not a muscle. There are, you can do curls and you can isolate the muscle, but you see people doing this to do their curls, and that's momentum. That's not a muscle. You're not working anything anymore. You're working your back and it's jerking things around. And some of the things that you told me too, maintaining constant tension. So slow up and slow back and maintaining that tension really puts a strain on your muscles, which is exactly what you want to do if you want to grow strength and some hypertrophy. I'm trying to get some hypertrophy, and so I'm working to failure on a lot of stuff. Um, it's interesting. I changed my workout routine. I was doing all full body 3 times a week, but now went into splits where I'm doing back and biceps one day and chest and triceps another day. So it's about an hour both of those exercise or those days. And so I'm really working them hard. If I find I'm okay, now what do I do? I just try to look for a machine that's going to work the heck out of my triceps. I just work until it burns and I can't do it anymore. And so I'm trying to build up a little more bulk. I've always been about this size, 150, but what's changed is the muffin top now is kind of migrated into muscle on my shoulders and my arms. And so I think the big thing is really, paying attention to the form. And if you do want to do a good strength growth and also hypertrophy, you really want to push your muscles until they can't do it anymore, because that's when they learn, oh, I need more. Just like, if mitochondria can't keep up, they need more. So,
Yeah. Describe the process of getting used to getting to failure, because this is something that's a little bit difficult for people if they're not used to it. I never try to like start with that with somebody, but we
right.
always build towards that. Like, I count to 12 poorly for reps or whatever. And I tell all my clients, like, we count reps, sure, but reps don't really count. What counts is that your muscles receive a stimulus, receive a signal to have a response, and that's what's most important. So can you describe what it was like for you to get more familiar with, however you want to call it, exercise, muscle fatigue or muscle
Right.
failure? How long do you think that kind of took for you, and what was it like to kind of push through like the anxiety or the desire to quit when you may have another rep or two in the bag?
So, like I said, I worked out quite a bit when I was 40. And at that time, I had a subscription to Muscle magazine or something where, Arnold Schwarzenegger was always on the cover, and so I did a lot of reading in there. And so again, I wanted to find out why and how things worked. And so I just started with that. And they did talk a lot about going to failure and number of reps and things like that. But I think there's been a lot of research lately that's told us even more about how our bodies kind of change and work. So like for a chest press right now, I start with the most amount of weight that I put on right now. I think it's like 205 pounds or something like that. So I'll do 10 or 12 of those. And that 12th one, I'm shaking, trying to get it up there. And then I strip off 10 pounds off each side and jump right into it again. And that goes to a concept that I heard about called effective reps. So like you were saying, if you can do 10 and then you rest, then you go back and you do 10, well, the effective reps are actually maybe from 6 to 10, where it's hard to do. Those are the effective reps. The other ones are just sort of, tiring your muscles out until you get to the effective reps. And so by giving less time for my muscles to recover and stripping the weight, I can do less weight because I'm still tired, but yet I'm sort of extending those effective reps. And so I work all the way down to, gosh, 50 pounds. So it's a total of 95 pounds. And I'm going really slow, and I'm just shaking. And so sometimes I might even be able to do only 8 of those because it's just, gosh, that's not much weight. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that, clearly, but that's one of the ways I try to really tire things out.
Yeah, that's great. I remember Ben Bokikio talking about that, like we're learning, 50, 60 years ago that like we do, 9 sets of something and it's a 10th set that is where you're getting the most exhausted, where you get the most benefit. And him just having the common sense thought of, well, why don't we just skip the first 9 and make the 10th number one and make it the most effective we can?
That
What,
is
what are
so
we
true.
doing on this other stuff? What you're describing for the listener or somebody watching, what you're describing is called a drop set. And yes, it is a wonderful technique to be able to take yourself to failure. Like you said, there's many different techniques you can do. So
Right.
the gym that you and I went to, the refinery, John, who runs the place with his wife, Jess, they collect machines that have multiple load
Oh,
points
right.
where
Yes.
where a lift could effectively give you more weight or less weight depending on how much mechanical advantage you have, and you can make those be adjustable. This is the reason why, like you mentioned, resistance bands. I think resistance bands are wonderful. If you get thick enough ones that are challenging to you,
Hmm.
think about like a deadlift. When you're addressing a deadlift, when your back is all the way down, you have almost no resistance on the band. It's completely slack. And as you pull up, as you're gaining advantage, you're also gaining weight. It's like you're adding weight as you go. And you can work in different ranges. Like you can work in the deepest range until that's exhausted. You can work in the middle range until that's exhausted. Like there's so many, like you said, different
Right.
techniques that you can include. But the important thing, as you said, is you've got to take yourself to a deep level of muscular fatigue. You've got to kind of push past where you think you need to quit. Try to get 1 or 2 more reps because that signal is so important to get you what you actually need. When I see people at the gym and they're just doing their 3 sets to 10 and they set the weight down and I see there was no real force or strain, like look how hard you've been lifting. You've been wanting to build muscle. It's not that easy. You're still about
It's
150
not.
pounds. You look amazing. You look like Paul
Thank you.
Bunyan with the picture you posted the other day doing yard work with your shirt off.
Uh,
Like damn, he is ripped.
uh,
But yeah, it's you have to get to that level for your body to want to build muscle, and it's a slow process and it is challenging. But I think a lot of people also find as well that like if you are willing to go to that level, now you can start to do what you're doing with your sets and splits where you're only working those body parts once a week. And yeah, an
mhm.
hour is a long workout, but you're not lifting 6 days, 7 days a week. You don't need to get all of that done.
Right. And at my age too, if anybody's listening to this that thinks they're going to start out, really don't go that hard right away because you'll hurt and you could hurt yourself. I like I said, I've got a couple of bad shoulders. One clavicle was busted on the outside, so this one clicks a lot, and I had a short head bicep tendon that had to be reattached. So this tendon, and I'm just a mess. So, I've gone with the weight slowly to find out where I can push. Now I'm feeling pretty confident that 205 pounds is probably what I want to maybe start with, because that doesn't hurt very badly. And if you can't do 4 sets or 4 reps rather, I think that's really important, that maybe you're using too much weight, especially at my age. Younger kids, they can do anything they want, and they it doesn't matter really. But at my age, you want to start out slowly and with just a little bit of weight. Just get used to the exercise, do it properly, see where your range of motion is, and then just work with that, because you can get hurt. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Hire a trainer. We're not as expensive as people think. You'll learn more in a really short amount of time than you think. We're not slave drivers typically. We want to educate you and help you along the way. And so I always think training is such a good investment. And speaking of which, you have decided to become a health and exercise coach, which is absolutely amazing. Can you tell us about that journey as you've been kind of working out of the why and maybe thinking to yourself, like, I wonder if I could do this?
Right. So it's kind of interesting. My wife is one of my biggest fans. She's just a darling. And so I started doing all this learning about our bodies and all this stuff. And I regale her with my stories and things. And she just said, you should get a nursing degree and become a nurse and stuff. And at this age, I don't know if I had that much energy to go to school that long. And once I were to become a nurse, then what would I do? I mean, by that time I'd be 68 or something like that. And anyway, so that's kind of when I started looking in the paper, or not the paper, but the job listings, to see if there was anything available at the Y. And one day I was working out, and one of the health coaches actually approached me and said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds great." So he introduced me to my current boss, and I applied for the job, and they gave me the job. So I'm really lucky.
That's fantastic. That's so cool that they approached you. Did you
Yeah.
have to get any like certifications or anything?
Not for this. This is nowhere near as what expert as something like a NASM or some of the other certifications. This is basically just helping folks with learning the equipment. We have Cybex machines, which are basically pulley machines that have a pin that you can set various weights and do exercises. And we go all the way up to free weights. And so it's just sort of showing people how to lift properly, maybe get over some injuries that they've had. If they're working on sort of some physical therapy for maybe shoulder injuries or knee injuries, we'll help them work into that nice and slowly so they don't hurt themselves. And then a lot of people want to lose weight as well, so that we talk a little bit about nutrition and how important that is. And sleep is really important too, the whole sleep hygiene. If we don't sleep properly, our need and our desire for carbohydrates just jumps like crazy, because our brain is tired. It wants energy, and the one that we know best is carbs. And so we just jump into that when we're tired, and it's anyway. Then that goes to heck. And then if because we're eating all these carbs, we're crashing and we don't feel like exercising because we're tired, and then we're tired because so it just continues on this loop. And anyway, so we help folks with all those kinds of things, and also letting them know what other things are available, like classes. A lot of times people don't necessarily need to lift weights. They just need to get active first. And so there are a lot of really great classes and things that are offered that can help people sort of be part of a community and get some exercise in as well.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. It sounds like you're kind of doing like an orientation,
Exactly.
kind of a thing, consultation, orientation, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I told you off air before we jumped on that for whatever reason, the Salt Lake area, I'm not aware of any place in Utah that has a YMCA. We obviously have other facilities, but we don't have one. And so I am absolutely not familiar with them. I thought they were more like kind of like low cost to join, really kind of basic, community based kind of things. And what you're describing, at least the location that you have, sounds quite nice. It's a little bit more upscale. It charges a little bit more for a membership.
Right.
Do they give you much resource as far as like, we do talk a smidge about nutrition. So here's this handout that's, branded from the company, or is it kind of the wild, wild west about whatever you can talk about?
They do have a structure to it, fortunately. So that's kind of nice. At least they give us an indication of what they'd like us to talk about. They give us a little pamphlet on my plate. They have for the program that we put people through, which is a 4-visit program. There are a list of questions that we ask that sort of help us to understand what their incentive is, what they're motivated by, what their goals are, what they'd like to see after they're done with this, or what they're trying to work toward. And so we try to help them gain that. And the motivation is really up to them. We really want to make them motivated for themselves so that they come in. It's not us telling them, oh, you need to get in here. It's them saying, I really want to be there. And so we try to make this really fun and say, what are the things that are keeping you from getting into the gym? If it's family stuff, you're too busy. Can you take 15 minutes each day and just exercise at home? Can you come in for an hour? And so we try to work with those limitations too.
Yeah. Okay. No, that sounds really helpful. So knowing what you know, and then having to use a pamphlet that talks about my plate, how do you think you're going to orient yourself and kind of ride that line of like, yeah, I'm giving you this. Like, is it all about like asking leading questions? Like, yeah, this is my plate. Have you tried this before? Has this ever worked for you? Like, how are you going to approach balancing what they're giving you to give to people versus what you know?
Well, I think I'd probably do something like I know a bit more about what these things do for us and what they don't, or something like that. And I would probably go into, would you like to hear more about this? How these carbohydrates affect us? Would you like to know about what the 3 macronutrients are? Fat, protein, and carbohydrates. What makes them different? How are they built? What do they do in our bodies? And I would love to give a little class on each one of those things. It would just be so much fun to just give people some information so they actually know, oh, that's a saturated fat. That's what makes a saturated fat. Why do they call carbohydrates sugars? All
Yeah.
that sort of stuff that, can be done really pretty easily.
Yeah, gotcha. So we had a standard at the gym that I used to work at. We had a standard document that I would have to teach off of. That was exactly that. Basically, it was on the one side, it was called like how to build a meal. And so it was lean protein, fruits and vegetables, carbohydrate, starchy carbohydrate, I believe it said, and then healthy fats. And on the back side, it would give examples of all of those things. And so it exactly gave me that opportunity to say, like, let's flip this around. This is what protein does. This is what protein does not do. We want to try to get about this amount if you can. Here's fruits and vegetables, and this is in the carbohydrate family. So these are the ones that are not necessary. You only use them for energy, and you just try to like use those standard documents to kind of like plant some ideas in people. Like, here's why fat is healthy. Here's why we think fat is bad for us, and absolutely not in this kind of a context. And so,
Right.
I hope you find ways to be able to help people to kind of think a little bit differently, because it is frustrating out there. I mean, you mentioned certifications like NASM, ISSA is one. I have those certifications and they're good, and I'm not trying to poo-poo them. But I can also tell you, in my career of doing this for 18 years, I've had to unlearn a lot of the things that they taught us about training, and I don't think the same way I did as when I took those certifications. So I think you're a perfect person to be doing what you're going to be doing, and helping people along. You mentioned how much you off air. You mentioned how much you love like meeting new people and
Hmm.
helping people get that kind of passion and find their own motivation. Like you said, where do you see this going in the future? Do you see this expanding? Are you quite happy with the way it's looking for now? Do you think you'll add a certification or want to help people virtually or anything like that? Or yeah, is it just going to be something you do locally, just in your free time?
Boy, right now, I think I might just be doing it the same way I am, but I would like to get just a little bit of a presence on YouTube, doing some short videos, just maybe even just going through a biology book and going through chapters or something, just
That
talking
would be great.
briefly about, like what is a saturated fat? Why is it called saturated? And all that sort of stuff. I think it'd be really fascinating just for people to learn that kind of thing.
Yeah, you'd be a natural at that. Have you ever done a podcast interview before? Or is this your first time?
I have not. No, this is my first.
Okay, so
Yeah.
right off the bat, you're an absolute natural. You have a really good way of making things interesting. Your stories are interesting, but you
Oh,
give
thank
good
you.
examples and not only explain the science, but also kind of make it in a way that's easy to understand. I think our listeners would really agree with me. How long does it feel like we've been talking at this point?
Oh, gosh, 45 minutes?
Yeah, we've been talking for an hour.
Oh, okay. All
I'm
right.
looking down at my timer.
Wow.
It's 59
Wow.
minutes.
All right.
That's how much of a natural you are, my friend. Like
Oh,
you make time go super, super fast. It's wonderful to see your journey and how passionate you are about, again, educating other people.
thank you.
You're in the right place at the right time. You did
Mm,
it the same thing when I got to meet you in person. When you came to the seminar, it wasn't like you were just, sitting there, sitting back. You gave good examples and people really connected with you and the way you explain certain things. And it sounds different, not coming from the bozo in front of the room like me. It comes
you.
from somebody who's, has done it and has experienced it. And I'm so grateful that you decided to reach out. I always hope all of our listeners and people that watch us reach out and leave comments and yeah, we always try to reply to those. But I'm in particular very glad that you reached out to me last year and we've developed a great relationship and you found
Oh,
some time to
thank
come
you.
out here. And this has been an amazing hour that has just absolutely
Oh,
flown by.
it means
So
so much to me.
you're the best, man. I'm really glad we got to spend time together last year, and I'm really glad you took
Yeah.
time to be on our show today. Is there a place that you want people to go? Have you already started a YouTube channel? Like, where do you want people to find you and connect with you right now?
I haven't started it yet. I've got a little place out there that I've got 2 videos, but right now it's pretty sparse. So I wouldn't want to have people go there and go, this is it. So I'd like to sort of wait. And I think maybe watching this is probably a really good start. We just need to understand that, like I said in the beginning, we're kind of being handed a bad deck of cards. We're being told that we should eat carbohydrates. We should do these various things. We should take pharmaceuticals when we have a symptom instead of dealing with the root cause. And it's just not working. It's clear that it's not working. And I've used myself as my experiment and I've seen this works. So that's the message I'd like to get out is what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, here at Boundless Body Radio, we're always keen to try to get the hard-hitting breaking news of the day. And today is breaking news that we will have a YouTube channel featuring you at some point in the future. So whenever that
Uh,
gets started, please let me know so we can link that up and we'll throw that in the show notes. I think all of our listeners will be very excited for that to come out because it got a little taste of how much you are a natural at educating. They'll be looking forward to
thank
that
you.
as well. So yeah, man, I'm just so grateful for our friendship and so grateful for you and all
Me
the work
too.
that you've done and your passion to be able to share that message with others. I'm a little bit jealous of the little old ladies that get to come in and see you at the YMCA and watch them get all fired up about
They're so
weightlifting
sweet.
and proper nutrition. But for now,
Uh,
Greg, thank you so very much for taking the
thank
time to
you.
be on our show today. Really, really appreciate you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you for listening to Seeds for Health. I hope the information that I presented was informative. If so, please hit subscribe. Please also leave comments on how I can improve or topics that you'd like to see covered. Enjoy your journey to better health, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.